Hey, loves. Hello. How's everyone been? How are you doing? It's always a blessing to be here with you all live. Let me know how you're doing. How's everyone doing? What's been going on? Please, as always, I like our podcast to be interactive. So if you have any questions, drop the questions in the comments. My guests and I are definitely here for you to support you. And always my intention is for us to provide you with value and impactful information. I'm so blessed because my guests are always so inspiring and amazing. They always inspire me. And I know that there are so many other places that you can be. So thank you so much for joining us. I'm grateful. And you know what? To help us continue to bring incredible guests coming your way, please share, like, and subscribe. So I am Grace Redman, and thank you so much for joining me on another episode of Real Talk, where I get to have real life, raw conversations with incredible people from my circles and communities who overcome challenges and really create amazing. They never cease to inspire me. Today, my incredible guest is Gregory Meadows. Gregory is a coach who has 21 years of experience working with men, parents, and children who have been impacted by abuse and trauma. He helps families reconnect and find harmony within their homes again. He's also part of a men's circle committed to becoming the best men they can be through ruthless compassion, accountability, and goal setting. He is committed to changing the planet through children in one generation. Gregory has been called kind, compassionate, a great listener, knowledgeable, and many clients have expressed that Gregory has been the answer to their prayers. Help me welcome Gregory Meadows. He's amazing, and I'm so grateful to be hosting him today. Welcome, Gregory.
Hi, Grace.
How are you today?
I am well. I am really excited for our conversation today and to be of service.
Thank you. And I'm excited to chat because, what you're doing is so, important, necessary, and impactful. And I've connected with, so many coaches over the years, and you really are someone who I haven't had too many people who work with the men and the families, and being a mother, a wife, mother of two sons and a wife, it's so necessary. It really is time for us to, can I say it, heal our men.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we really need what we call mature masculinity in our society, where it's okay to be strong, it's okay to have emotions, it's okay to share the things that are challenging us, especially around mental health and things like that.
What do you think has been, well, still a stigma, around, first of all, it's not just, I think, a stigma around men. I think just in general, I grew up in a culture where, like, I went to therapy for 25 years and I hid that, you
Hmm.
know, and God forbid if you were a man and you chose to seek support or help, what is that stigma about?
It really, um, in our culture, we venerate men that are stoic, immovable, strong, and that sort of um, archetype. And that archetype doesn't leave any room for having our own trauma, having our own challenges, having our own um, things that we are struggling with. And so if we only allow men to be this one way, then men will feel more prone to, like, hide mental health issues, hide suicidal ideation, hide challenges with parenting difficult children, for example. And so we are slowly pushing the pendulum back in the opposite direction from, I would say, the 1950s to 1980s. There was this, like, you have to be strong, you can't be anything else. And the pendulum is moving in the other direction. And it's about finding that balance between being strong, but also being vulnerable, and having a safe place to do that, like
Yes.
a men's circle or a men's support group. Because as men, we look at the world in a different way. We try to equate everything to like an oil change. I just need these tools. It's going to take 35 minutes and it'll be done. And sometimes life is more complicated than that. And so um, we need to meet up with other men who are fathering each other
Mm.
into their greatness. And so that's a big, wide answer for why there's still this stigma.
I love what you just said. Get into groups that are, and the men are fathering each other.
Hmm.
What
Yeah.
does that mean? In my mind, I have an idea what it means. What does fathering each other mean to you?
So, for many men in my generation and younger, um, so we either didn't have a father figure, or our father figure was pretty neutral, maybe how would I characterize it? Not maybe not strong, maybe not a role model. He just kind of clocked in and clocked out as a dad, things like that. And then to the worst end of the spectrum, we've some of us men have had fathers that were abusive verbally, emotionally, and even worse. And so when you don't have a positive male role model in your immediate circle, you end up fathering yourself along the way. We end up mimicking what we see other men do or how other men should be. And so we say, oh, I should be that way.
Mhm.
And by getting together in a group or a circle or a team, we get a chance to really suss out what is the best path forward. What is the most mature way to respond to this? How can we support one another in, as men, leaning into uncomfortable spaces,
Mhm.
either in our relationship or with our children or at our job?
Mhm. That's beautiful because it's in the healing that, within the like when us as parents are not healed, it causes wreckage and consequences in the family. And I've seen it, and no one's perfect, but I've seen it, in my own family with my kids. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I tell my husband, that's that's because of us. It's not blaming us, but I can see it. And and I'm grateful that, my husband had just started to do the work.
Mhm.
Why is it so important for us parents to heal and do the work? Why is that so important to the family?
Yeah. So generational trauma is a real thing.
It is a real thing, yes.
And none of us get out unscathed from childhood. And so the greatest gift that you could offer your children is healing yourself so that they can have the best role models of what to look for in a partnership in the future. And when they become parents, they have a rough idea, a rough plan of how they want to raise their children and things like that. And so healing our own stuff is vital because it's really planting a seed into the future of your own generations. And there's
Mm,
a saying, plant trees in the shade of which you know you will never sit. And
mm,
it's really important. And you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be a little bit better than you were the week before or the
mm.
month before and things like that.
Yes. It's, one step at a time.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about healing and doing the work, maybe for someone who's watching and they're not like, what does that mean? Because, and I would say, okay, you have to heal and do the work. But sometimes people looking at me and I get it. I'm like, I get it. What does that mean? What does healing and doing the work mean to
Yeah.
someone who maybe is not in, this industry? Because
Yeah.
we know what it means.
So the work is the things that we know that we struggle with. And so for dads, it might be anger management.
Mm,
Yeah,
yeah.
I get a little too angry and I pop off too quickly and I will yell or I lose my cool or things like that. Maybe for mothers, it might be, I'm just going to let him do whatever he wants. I really don't want to set boundaries because when I do set boundaries, he throws a huge temper tantrum and toys are going flying all over the place. And so it's really those things that we know are problematic in our families and within ourselves, right? Um,
Mhm.
you
That's
know, it,
really
yeah. And so, like, if we have trust issues, that will show up in our parenting. If
mhm,
we have boundary issues, that will show up in our parenting. And so, it's really just taking an open and vulnerable assessment of the things that are challenging for us, whether it's money or relationships or boundaries or trust or any of those things. And that's where the work is, right? And so that might mean, hey, I'm going to get a financial advisor. Hey, I'm going to go see a therapist to talk about some of the things that happened to me when I was a child, right? It's really taking actionable steps where you're uncomfortable but not going to shut down,
mhm.
if that makes sense.
It does. No, that's a beautiful way of putting it. So the work is taking an honest assessment of yourself, like really getting raw and honest and and admitting, okay, like these are my gaps. I have an anger issue or I have issue with boundaries and then looking at those areas and saying, okay, how can I get better at that?
Yeah.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And now and so when we're doing the work, we're healing our well, we're healing the generational trauma. And oftentimes for me, the healing and the work was connected to my worth.
Hmm.
How do you see that? Is that different for men?
No, not different. If you know anything about the love languages, built into a man's DNA, most men's DNA, our love language is acts of service. We
Mm,
want to be productive. We want to be of use and of value and of need to, whether it's a job or a family or our parents or our children. We want to be of service. And so that's vital, um, for a man to integrate into whatever his purpose is. So I truly believe that if a man doesn't have or know his purpose, and purpose is another abstract term, right? But it's the things that we do that makes us excited to put our feet on the floor in the morning. It's the difference we make in the world. It's the smiles we help our children have. It's the boss who says, "Wow, you really knocked it out of the park," And it's those things. When we have purpose, we can have vision, and when we have vision, we have direction,
mm.
and when we have direction, we create safety with all of those around us because they know where we're going and where they're going if they're in our family.
So it's the why, having that vision
Mhm.
and the purpose that helps move, not only, men forward, but it sounds like when that the man has a vision, it can help move the whole family forward. And I
Yeah.
know there has to be, it takes two.
Yeah.
What would be the consequences of not doing the work?
Well, um, you can't give what you don't have.
Oh, wow. Yes, I haven't heard that in a long time.
Yeah. So you can't give what you don't have, and our children are going to grow up and they're going to look for relationships. They're going to look for partnerships and romantic relationships similar to their parents. And so, if you have a healthy relationship with your child, they're going to look for another healthy partner, right? Sons look for the healthy version of their mother. Daughters look for the healthy version of their fathers. And so, um, if that relationship is maligned in any way or strained or just not where it could be, they're going to grow up to try to heal the relationship that they had with the parent
Mhm.
in their romantic relationship. And so it just perpetuates this cycle of uh,
Dysfunction.
dysfunction. Yeah, yeah, definitely. And
Because I've been in a lot of dysfunctional situations.
yeah, and really, like, sometimes as parents or as adults, we may not feel like we're worth it. Oh, I don't want to spend all that money on the therapy, and but most parents would agree that their children are worth it, and they're willing to do anything and everything so that they make sure that their children have what they need to grow up to be the most stable, loving, contributing citizens, and to have healthy relationships. And so that means leaning into our own discomfort. Maybe that means leaning into an apology, admitting that we did the best we could, but we were struggling at that time too. So that's a large answer to that question.
Well, what I heard you, what's I think the undertone of that is, us taking accountability for our
Shortcomings.
shortcomings, which is not easy, especially if we are, in our ego and we're already feeling less than,
Yeah.
to admit that we're wrong can be, you know, you could feel a lot of shame.
Yeah.
But once we start doing the work and recognizing like we're all perfectly flawed
Yeah.
for a reason to get us closer to our, truest self, it's a little bit easier.
Yeah. Well, and as children, we idolize our parents most of the time.
True.
We somehow think that they're perfect and they figured it out. We don't see them as human beings who have their own struggles, challenges, flaws, fears, doubts, and things like that. And so as we grow into a teenager and into young adulthood, we begin to see our parents as human beings. And
Mm.
that can be a grieving process, right?
Yeah.
Because we may be upset with our parents, we may be frustrated, we may be sad, all these sorts of things. And so there has to, just as parents provide a safe place for children to share and to reveal things and to talk about tough things or moments, parents also need to use discernment about the right time to have a difficult conversation about, hey, I was struggling 6 months ago with this thing. I really could have done better. Here's how I'm taking actionable steps to become a better mother or a better father or a better grandparent or things like that. And so um, it requires discernment, and it is a sensitive conversation, but it also models to children how to be vulnerable.
Yes. What you're talking about, like owning the mess to the children. So one of a good friend of mine, she had a son and then was raising her youngest brother, and she was, I'm just she's okay if I share this. She was, a mess, and just, partying hard, and just the kids were seeing things that they shouldn't have been seeing. And these now the kids are adults, and they grew into wonderful adults, productive adults. And one of them is, a pharmacist, one of them works for the FBI. And I went to her and I said, like, how did your kids come out okay? Like, you still some crazy times.
Yeah, yeah,
And she said what you said. She said, I want, I owned, and I let them know, like, hey, I have these problems and I'm aware of it, but that in no way, shape, or form means that I don't love you. So she always was very verbal with how much she loved them and encouraged them. And she, reminded me that, we're all messed up. But if you just show your love and encourage your kids, and that always stuck with me. What do you think about that?
I think that at a certain age of development, a child starts to understand some deeper underpinnings of what's going on. And the goal, I think, of one of many goals of parenthood is to align your actions with your words, right? You can say, I love you, but if you never make them food and they always are fending for themselves, a child will start to kind of learn what love means and how that either fits into what the parent is doing and saying or not, right? And so it sounds like your friend moved her actions in alignment with her words. And that's a powerful testimony to what's possible for other parents. It's also, um, it can be very disarming because children can be angry as they grow into adulthood. This didn't happen, that didn't happen. Why did you do this? Why did you make these decisions? And being vulnerable and forthright and saying, I did the best I could based on my experience or my childhood and things like that. You may not have this loving hallmark moment, but it can begin the healing process for parents and children.
So you have to start somewhere.
Yeah, you have to start somewhere, and I believe that starting with ourselves
Mm-hmm.
can in turn overflow to how we treat our children, because oftentimes as adults we don't treat ourselves very well.
Very true.
And yeah, and so by practicing treating ourselves with love and kindness and respect and having boundaries and trusting ourselves that we're going to follow through can spill over into how we parent.
Mm. That's so true. And I've done, a lot of work over the years, and I've noticed as I do the work and I heal, I notice that my children shift,
Mm-hmm.
my husband shifts. I know that's not always the case,
Yeah.
but I didn't believe that when they said, when you heal, you're healing the lineage. Can you speak on that?
Yeah, we are the company we keep. And
Mm,
so as one person starts to heal in a family, it can create dissonance, right? Some sort of energetic dissonance. Oh, mom's not yelling at me anymore. I don't know what to do with that. What do you mean she's, like she's supposed to get mad. She's supposed to yell and all these sorts of things. Or when dad gets upset, he slams the door and he's not doing that anymore. And so there's this energetic recalibration or congruency that has to come back in. And so it gives, when one person in a family unit, he starts to work on the healing, it gives other people permission to be
mm,
just a little bit more vulnerable, to be just a little bit more compassionate and things like that. And so when one person starts doing it, it positively or can positively impact everybody else.
mhm,
And especially in two-parent households, it really is important that both parents work together to be on the same page as much as feasible and things like that, to really because when there's a two-parent household, it really creates a strong pillar in which the family unit moves and operates and talks and has meetings and goes on vacations and things like that. And so when that's stable, the children are more likely to be stable. When a partnership is unstable or a parent is going through some challenges that they're unstable, it will spill over to the children.
for sure. And what if in the situation where it's, the parents are not together and they're co-parenting and there's challenges, in that dynamic?
Yeah.
Like,
Oh
what
gosh,
do you
I've worked I've worked with so many high conflict divorces, and I think like um, there's no one right way. But what I will say universally is that once two adults decide that, hey, we're not the best fit for each other, we're going to go on and live our lives and things like that, the higher purpose, the noble cause is ensuring that the children are stable, they feel safe, and everything else, all the other unhealed stuff that did not happen in the relationship, between two people, that needs to be healed outside the context of parenting,
Mm,
because it is um, when one or both parents negatively talk about the other parent, for example, it ends up weaponizing the child. And
mm,
a child is not a weapon. They're not meant to be a weapon. But when we say things about the other parent, it ends up triangulating the child and putting them in the middle. And they've been on the planet very little amount of time, and they don't have the capacity or the experience to navigate the complexity of adult relationships. And so I always tell two parents, like, whatever your beef is between the other parent, and I mean, whether there was abuse, domestic violence, infidelity, any of those things, the higher purpose is ensuring the child's safe, stable, and that you're working together as civil as possible to come up with environments, like two parent household environments, that promote the values, traditions that you want to instill in the children. So it is a very, very complex
mhm.
situation, but I always recommend, like, would you rather, you know, fight with your partner, or ensure that your child is, safe and stable, and they don't ever have to feel like they have to pick one parent or another? That's where we need to seek our own support. We need to go to therapy. We need to seek our own support groups or things like that, so that we can heal our side of the fence and become the best parent possible. Because divorces and separations and things like that, that does negatively impact a child. It just will 98% of the time.
And then that unhealed, that trauma impacts the child, and then he becomes that adult carrying that trauma into adulthood, which I want to talk about the term parentified. We talked about that
Yeah.
offline, and that resonated for me.
Yeah.
So can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So children who grow up in homes, and traditionally this tends to be the oldest child of a sibling group.
Which I was the oldest, and I believe you are the oldest too.
Correct, correct. And so what will happen in an unstable partnership and home is that a child will often have to step in to take on adult responsibilities or roles. This is where, like, we can end up having to take care of younger siblings, where parents will leave and we're responsible for that sibling, and we may be young ourselves. And then we may offer, if we have an unstable parent, we may become a surrogate partner for them. And that means they will be sharing, or they could be sharing, inappropriate information. And then we have to emotionally stabilize ourselves as a child, which we have very little practice
Mhm.
doing. And then we're supposed to stabilize an adult that is supposed to have
Right.
those skills, because they're a parent now and things like that. And so it can become really challenging when children have to grow up faster than their years, so to speak. And so it can create problems later on in life and things like that.
Well, that created a lot of problems for me later on in life, taking on so much responsibility, and then I tied it to my worth, and then it was just a whole, it was all tied to my belief system.
Hmm.
And so that's why I know it's so important to do the work to give our children, not that like you said, they're not going to go unscathed,
Yeah.
but it's just a different,
Yeah.
it's just a different, I mean, what do you call it, trauma impactful moments, or What else can we call it?
Mm, that's a good question.
Because trauma feels so heavy.
Right. I would say that if we can step back and remember that we are just a steward of their experience, we are here to kind of give them some guardrails, some
Mhm.
safety guardrails, but ultimately, we're there to witness and support and affirm their childhood experience. Like maybe one week they want to be an astronaut and the next week they want to be a firefighter, and or they want to play music, or they want to go to karate or whatever. But to kind of affirm that experience and that exploration, because that's essential to them having discernment, critical thinking skills, and things like that. And so when we step back outside of that, I like the term open and curious. When we
Okay.
stay open and curious with our children, we will give them the leadway to kind of bump into things within the safety of a home environment, right? Because when you're out in the world as an adult, there's less people necessarily, giving you guardrails. You have to kind of implement your own guardrails, right? And
Right.
so, as when children are in the home, just offering them a place to make mistakes, be angry, um, be defiant, right? Because I would rather teach a child how to be defiant, how to process emotions in a home versus they've never processed emotions. They're out in the world, that's their first job, and the boss says, "Hey, I know you just mopped the floor, but the kid on aisle 5 just threw up, so you got to go do it again." Right? And
Right.
and the kid doesn't know how to process emotions, and they're really upset, and then it causes problems in adulthood and things like that.
Mhm.
So I don't know if I know like how I would frame it as a term, but I really feel like if parents can step back and allow children to have the developmentally appropriate experience for their
Mhm.
age, um, we have a greater chance of allowing them to become really well thought, empathetic, compassionate adults.
I love that, and I love how you said just step back, allow them to explore, get curious, because I feel like we put so much pressure on, children and young adults to know everything, be everything, do this, do that, and I feel like it's caused and then social media on top of that, it just puts so much pressure on this generation. And one of the questions I wanted to ask you is, are you seeing some patterns running through families, these days?
Um, yeah, there are a couple patterns. I would say the biggest pattern that I see, and this is because, again, the sort of parenting pendulum swings back and forth through time and through cultural shifts and things like that. But I see a lot of parents that want to be their child's friend,
Oh,
and there's a, there's a certain amount of intimacy and connection that we should have with our children, but not at the same level as a friendship,
got it.
right? And so a lot of parents will want to be friends with their child, and they want that intimacy and connection. Sometimes that's a parent's way of getting their own needs met through a child, which is not necessarily appropriate and depends on the situation. We as adults should try to meet our own needs as much as possible. We are there to meet the needs of our child. The child's not there to meet the needs of the adult. And
True
so,
that.
yeah. And so, so when we allow them some space, and we can, oh geez, how would I say this? When we just allow them some space, um, they'll come around. It's the friendship. It still needs to be, hey, I'm the deciding person because I've lived enough life. I
I'm the
want to make
parent.
sure that you're okay. Right. Like, hey, you can go try that, but that may not go well for you,
Right. Especially
or
if I'm the
hey,
parent.
that boyfriend or girlfriend may not be the best fit for you, but I know that you really care about this person, and relationships are really important to you as a teenager. So I'm here for you if you have questions, you need to talk, or you're frustrated. So just allowing them to make some mistakes, but also not reducing yourself to a friendship level, because then that ends up causing problems later if you need to implement rules or boundaries and things like that.
I remember our parents, don't do that. Why? Because I said so.
Yeah, yeah.
I've done that though with my kids. Why? Because I said so.
Well, and the opposite end of that is where we're always explaining ourselves to children, and then there becomes the, well, your reason isn't good enough, dad or
Right.
mom, and I don't agree, so I'm going to do what I want anyway. So there's this balancing act, and it depends on each family as a unique configuration.
Ugh,
I think some explanation is good, and I think like ultimately your no should be no and your yes should be yes.
yeah. Well, parenting is hard.
It is.
Like one of the hardest things I've ever done. I've ever
Yeah,
done. Like,
absolutely is. I always recommend when parents are being asked, can I go do this? Can I have this? The answer should always be maybe, unless it's something like, hey, can I go with my 15-year-old friend skydiving? And no, or something like that, right? Like something that's obvious, but always a maybe gives parents permission to think about it before they give a yes or a no. And when children sometimes push back, no, I need an answer now, I need an answer now. Well, if you need an answer now and I haven't had time to think about it, it's probably not going to be the answer that you want. So it's better that I tell you maybe, and then I need to cook dinner, and after dinner I clean up the kitchen, and I'll have some time to think about it then, and and then we can be curious with our kids, right? Well, okay, you want to go skydiving? Who's going to be there? Are there going to be adults? Is it going to be supervised? What kind of plane?
right,
We can ask
right,
all these
right.
questions and be curious then to kind of help them think through some of their maybe wild and outlandish wants and desires.
It's also tough, to stay patient when you're working all day, and then you have to come home and then cook and clean, and then you have the partnership, and maybe that's not going well, and the kids, and what would you recommend, to maybe parents that want to do the best they can, but they're feeling overloaded themselves, and they're like, I can't do this.
Well, I think getting an outside perspective is always important, because sometimes we all, as adults, we have blinders on, right?
Yes.
Like we only see things binary, black and white. It's only either or, things like that. And so having an outside perspective, whether that's a family friend, um, a coach, a therapist, somebody that can look objectively into the situation, it's always, I would say, money well spent if you're going to spend money to do that, because they will see things that maybe you didn't. And I think that self care is vital
Yes.
to parents having a safe well being inside themselves, um, and then feeling that they have the capacity, right? Because you can't pour from an empty cup kind of thing,
Right.
right? Like if you're giving and giving and giving and giving and always giving and never replenishing, it's only a matter of time before there's a breakdown.
Yep.
Only a matter of time, right? So if we know that we're going 80 miles an hour and there's no brakes, eventually we're going to hit the wall. It would be smarter to ask for help, to ask for perspective. Hey, can you come over and watch the children for 1 hour? I'm literally going to walk around the block. I'm going to go to Starbucks and get a drink. I'm going to literally disconnect from my life so that I can see it as a third person versus being in it first person. So asking for help, taking breaks, Self-care is really vital, and figuring out a way to do that, right? And that may mean I'm going to sacrifice over here so I can have over here, right? So each family is unique, but those are some of the things that I would recommend if things are kind of 80 miles an hour, there's no breaks. Everybody's getting their needs met except for the parent, the primary parent, or whatever. So those are some things that I would recommend.
I love it. And I know sometimes, I'm speaking for myself too, back in the days, like you create your own crap because you don't want to let go. Well, you can't have everything all at one time. And
Right,
so like you said, sacrificing, or I don't want to use this word, making the decision, what's important in this season.
right.
Okay, this is what's important. It's work,
Yeah,
but it's worth it.
yeah, it's absolutely worth it because
Yeah,
you get a better version of yourself. Your children get a better version of you, and everyone around you will notice, right? So
absolutely.
maybe I can't afford an hour massage, and because of drive time and costs and all that, but maybe I can just sit in the bathroom and close the door and lock the door for 10 minutes, and I'm just going to massage my own feet,
Right,
or something like that, right? Start small. It
right,
doesn't, you don't have to shoot for the moon right away, even though a lot of times parents are so depleted. They're like, I just need a week off from my family, right? Maybe you don't get a week. Maybe you get an
right.
hour. Maybe you get 10 minutes. But doing that is a little act of self care that can build to, oh, okay, I'm going to pay a babysitter for 3 hours so my husband and I can go out to dinner and have a date or things like that.
It's also important, and one of the themes is, again, it's starting with us.
Mhm.
It starts with us, and then it ripples out. One thing you talked about self care, and one thing I love about you is that you're black belt. So how has having a black belt like helped with your self care and helped on this journey?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when I was 17, I was getting picked on. I just moved to a new school, moved away from my original home that was pretty stressful. It was not healthy. Moved into a new school, and I had a fantasy that I was going to be the new cool kid
Oh,
that you
I
see in all the teen movies and all that, and that just did not happen for me. And I was getting picked on, and so I was like, I really want an edge as the skinny guy. So I
love
started doing karate and built up my confidence, and it helped me with my physical health, my mental health.
Mhm.
It gave me purpose and kind of a passion for things, and just I felt more confident as a young man in the world that if in fact I was in a bad situation, I could defend myself at least, or something like that. And that had morphed into, and that gave me the courage, because it took me 5 years to get that. It was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and a couple broken bones,
it.
and, and then that segued into yoga,
Mhm.
and eventually I got my yoga certification, and so it's been a building of activities, that is another example of self-care. And so I do yoga, I do weights and things like that. So that's a way that I take care of myself, especially like as I age. I don't want to be a brittle old person in a walker. Like, nothing against those people, but like I want to be flexible and vital and that sort of thing. And so that's how I started my self-care journey back when I was a teenager.
Yeah, I mean, 17 years old. And I love like how you brought it full circle because it is about being, you know, physically fit. That leads to being emotionally fit. You said it helped you emotionally and confidence,
Yeah.
mentally. So our
Yeah.
physical fitness helps us emotionally, mentally, physically, and that, also begins to help us spiritually.
Yeah, yeah. I heard something recently that physical exercise actually releases happiness chemicals
Yes.
into our bloodstream and into our brain. So,
I've
so
studied this. It
yeah,
releases dopamine and it's the best antidepressant
yep,
there is. This
yep.
has been so amazing. Like, I can't believe I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to be respectful of your time. and I could just be here with you for hours. I love the flow and the connection. It's been so, amazing, having you here with us. I'm going to have, just what's one thing that I loved that you said. You said God knows every dialect of every person's soul. And that's so beautiful. Can you just share with us on that?
Yeah, for those people that are spiritually inclined, um, I believe that the universe, the creator, God, whatever you want to call it, or him or her, um, knows how to speak to our hearts,
Mm,
knows how to communicate with us in a way that is very, very specific to us, right? And we know that there's thousands of dialects of language, right? But when we talk about the dialect of the soul, that means that the universe or God is communicating with me in ways that I will get.
mm,
And so, for example, recently I took a month off. I went on a road trip, and I specifically potentially looking into relocation. And I said, okay, God, I'm going to be open and curious. I'm not going to try to force anything. I just want to see what happens, And along my trip, I had like so many specific serendipitous signs that I
I
started writing them down. I
Mhm.
was like, there's no way that uh, this thing, I specifically crossed this thing and it was a specific thing meant for me. Like if you passed that street sign, it wouldn't mean anything to you. But for me, it was
Fine.
exactly like, for example, like I passed this road. It was called McCracken Road. I was born in McCracken County,
Oh, wow.
Kentucky. So this is just like a little small example of these things that happened on this trip that were specific to me, but not to anyone else. And I feel like that the universe is communicating with us all the time. They're giving us lessons and
Mhm.
opportunities to learn. They're putting people in our path. This podcast is going to show up serendipitously in your feed, or you might be scrolling and boom, there it is, and things like that. And so I do not believe in accidents. I think the universe is divinely organized. And so
Yeah.
this is what I mean by when um, when God knows every dialect, he's speaking to you specifically. Like if a red rose is specific to you, you will run into a red rose at this specific time, at this specific place to share with you a little hint of what's next.
I love that. The signs and staying open to the signs from God, the universe,
Yeah.
creator as you know it.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for today. It's amazing. You're just so such a beautiful person. Thank you for joining us. And I really love the work that you're doing. It's so necessary. So can you please share with us where our audience can find you?
Yeah. Grace, it's my honor to be here. And I'm
Yeah.
very grateful for the time that we shared and the discussion that we had. And I really feel like um, there's going to be a parent that's going to, this message is going to be specifically for them. And so you can find me on Facebook and Instagram. My username is Walking Meadows, just like it sounds, WALKING Meadows, MEADOWS. I also teach virtual parenting classes, and we'll be having virtual parent support groups. And you can reach out through either of those platforms and message me directly. And also, I have a website, walkingmeadows.com, where you can learn more about what I do.
Wonderful. And then I will also link, you put all of the information here for our audience. And if, they have any questions, please, put it in the chat. Myself or Gregory will come back to it. And as always, thank you so much for being here with us, watching, listening. And as always, if you'd like us to continue to bring you these incredible guests like Gregory, please subscribe, like, and share. Until next time, God bless, and we will see you soon. Thank you so much for being here. Gregory, hang on with me.